With over 25 years in the industry, Christie Summervill is the country's leading expert in compensation for banks and credit unions. She also happens to be BalancedComp's visionary founder and CEO, and my mom. Christie consistently strives to embolden and revolutionize HR's role and approach to employee compensation. Every service and product we offer was constructed on the foundation of her mission. As our company has grown, she's kept her eyes deep on the horizon, driving us to produce one of the country's largest salary surveys, and now one of its most relevant and in-depth conferences. Working with her has shown me what diligent service to an industry can yield over time. Ideas and insights that move the dial for tens of thousands of people across all 50 states. Palpable relief from human resource professionals and executives who are consistently facing unique and ever-evolving landscapes. Folks who are dealing with unimaginable pressure and stakes that couldn't be higher. That's who we strive to support and put in the driver's seat. Armed with unparalleled vision, experience, and data, please welcome Christie Summervill to the FinComp stage.
I'm so glad that Alex started this because the conversation that we're going to have now is difficult. And I'm aware that the people that I'm speaking to have been moving mountains for several years now. So I'm going to allow you to practically apply some of the things that he shared with us as we talk about some of the challenges that we have in compensation. 2023 was definitely the year of the corrective action, right? About 2/3 of the BalancedComp clients changed compensation levels twice last year, not once in the annual salary increase. So that means that the midpoint movements that you're going to see are going to be greater than what you're used to seeing. So it's quite likely that conversations that went well last year, which was your highest net income year that you've seen in decades. So when executives were feeling pain about salary administration, they're like, what can we do for our employees? And, you know, we need to do some corrective actions and let's get people closer to their midpoint because recruiters just literally made a killing. And who did they make that killing on? They made it on people that you've trained for 5 years that were under the midpoint. And how much of a salary increase did they have to get them to take them away from you? Well, the average increase was about 15%, 14%. Now your salary range is 40. They didn't have to go out of the range. They didn't have to pay above the range. They just had to pay appropriately to the market. So this year's conversation, I don't want to just spout theory to you and say, oh, this is what you should spend. But this year's conversation, when you have the interest rate environment that you do, where you're paying high on deposits, not all of your loans have corrected to the 7 to 8% that the market is requiring now for business loans. So your yield, your margin is much smaller. Now when you go back with all the information, we're going to need to use every one of Alex Doerr's tools to be able to stand side by side with executives and look at the problem and look at the constraints and help them decide how they want to impact it. So I really want to pour everything I've ever had, I want to equip you in every way I possibly can to go back and to have these kinds of conversations. And I don't have this conversation unmindful of the fact that you have remain to have a very competitive landscape with unemployment still at an all-time low. Very surprisingly, I've actually never seen a high inflation economy that didn't lead to higher unemployment at some point, but it's certainly not 2024. It's not happening yet. So that's going to stay in place. You do have an exhausted workforce, and I'm looking at some of the most exhausted after COVID. I mean, what class in HR taught you how to handle a pandemic? You had to learn on the fly, right? It was tough. You had to deal with fear like no one's business and all of that. And you were the cheerleader of the culture. So it really did land on you. And you did an amazing job, as you'll see from some of the statistics that I'm going to share with you. But not only is your workforce exhausted, some of you are exhausted. Many of you, most of you, are exhausted as well. I'm confident that with some of the skills that we just heard about, I was really excited about that. We chose him as a gift to you. Like, what can we bring that will fill the cups of the attendees and equip them to handle the challenges that they're going to? And I hope that he gave you some very pragmatic tools. I hope you got all of those cue cards. So nonetheless, you've been charged with, you have the pressure that you're going to need to control costs this year. So it's a completely different world. They don't care that they had the highest net income year that they did last year. They just know that the current spread is much smaller than that they've seen in a very long time. And yet the challenges are the same. So you're going to really need to be finessed to be the business advisor that I know that all of you want to do, all of you want to be. 73% of your employees are still somewhat satisfied compared to only 9% who are dissatisfied. That is the statistic I was talking about with the kind of jobs that you've done through COVID and through the Great Resignation. I think that's a statistic you really should take the time to stop and celebrate. I know there's always a big list of projects and things that you have to deal with, but if we just keep moving on to the next problem and the next mountain, that does lead to burnout, doesn't it? And I think that can be one of the biggest challenges that you should put on your horizon to consider. And I'm a big fan of this expression, you can't fight a fire, you can't learn to fight a fire in the middle of a fire. So, you want to stop and think about how do we stop and celebrate these things, before we get on to the next big thing. So 85%, regardless of the great job that you've done, 85% are still open to other job opportunities. That's tough, isn't it? Like, how much control can you have over that? I hope that you don't just focus on the numbers. Yes, comp is very important. Culture trumps comp. In fact, the less effective you are at culture, the more you're going to have to pay them to stay there and put up with that, right? What are some things that you've done? If you don't mind me asking some questions, one or two of you, Mike, if anyone has a mic, what are some things that you've done inside of your organization to impact burnout and culture? Can you share, would you be willing to stand up and share that with anyone?
Oh, Christie gives us 2 hours every Friday for training. It's really autonomous, we can think whatever we want. I think I remember our devs took a bread making class one time, but it's really cool. It's dedicated time for professional development, a little bit of downtime on Friday afternoons. And I think people really like it when they hear that that's a commitment to our culture. We really value training. We're going to make time for it.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Friday afternoons are the least effective time, I think, for many people. So I thought if we got something out of it, that would be a good investment. And it came to my attention that we were not a training, I had someone say, we're not a training organization. And it freaked me out. I'm like, you're right, we're really not. And we're consultants, but we were so busy working that we weren't filling our own cup. So that was something that we put in place. And still, from time to time, I stop and I think about that. And I'm like, are we getting our money's value out of that? And I'm like, well, based on our turnover, I would guess that's true. Yeah. 51% believe that employees have never felt like finding another job was easier at the same or higher level. Woo! That's kind of hard to compete with, right? The good news is that 71% of CEOs expect this. They realize that it's a tight labor market. which will be your entourage to the conversation about comp that you're going to need to have because it's bothering them. Have any of you had people who interviewed for jobs and after you got to the end and you wanted to hire them, you got the sense that they were just interviewing so that they could go back to their employer for a higher raise? Look at these heads bobbing. Would you raise your hand if you had that experience? Look at that. Oh, I can take a lot, but don't waste my time. I'm too busy. I am too busy. Yeah, that's a thing. That really is a thing. You know, I always say it's not who you pay, it's not what you pay. Sometimes it's who you pay. I love this one. I just bought my coworker a Get Better card. They're not sick. I just thought they could do better. Quiet quitting is a thing. Are you experiencing it? That low disengagement? And, you know, when I put the causes of it, excess workload, when you've got people that are picking up because you've got some spots open, so it's harder on the whole team. Initially, everyone's like, okay, we can do that. But after a while, it gets to be a little bit difficult. It starts to suck the energy out of you. Poor compensation, lack of boundaries, insufficient support from managers. You know, we have a thing, I mean, in our company, the culture, I mean, we're small. I don't have to deal with what you deal with. We are a team of 16, okay? But for us, we are not a stay-in-your-lane company. I want everyone's million-dollar idea. I don't care if you're in marketing or not, or software or not. Like, it's my job to make sure I vet those great ideas and put them into play for the benefit of the company. And I think that's, you know, not speaking up in meetings is very expensive, right? There's also act your wage. I act my wage. I see something that needs to get done. I say someone else will get it. So, yeah. But why are these employees quitting? Now, this isn't just for your industry. This is really for the nation at large. But career advancement, that's a challenge because if you're a small to medium-sized credit union, there is a limit. And let me tell you what career advancement is not. It is not adding a 3 after the title of teller. It's not teller 3s and 4, okay? That is not career advancement, right? Remote work is a deal. I know that many of you worked remote, and frankly, employees proved that they could be very successful working remotely. And then we said, I don't care. We want you back in the office. I think a better way to phrase that might be we're better together. I heard that. I heard that last night a lot. I thought I'm gonna say that. It puts a good positive. We are better together. You can't plan a creative $1 million idea generating session on Slack. Like, come with your best ideas. We're gonna hit it. You know, there's so much that happens in that water cooler talk and stopping by people's office. And I understand that it's just not practical to have every position working out. How many of you are in a we don't allow remote working any at all culture? Just raise it up high. Just want to see. Yeah, okay. I'm not here to should on anyone. That was SHOULD in case you wondered. Okay, just so we're clear on that. Yeah. How many of you have a hybrid? Yeah. Did you have a hybrid 3 years ago? Is this new to you? Yeah, I think this is pretty new. Yeah, leadership, culture, the ability to go into the office, that one's kind of interesting. I'm not seeing, and I don't agree with this, that what I'm presenting, I don't see compensation on here. I think that a lot of people are interested in being able to make more money. And I will tell you, I had a board member about a year ago say after a project, and I was rolling out the results, and he said, Christie, we got something different here. We've got something kind of special here for employees. We're a family-friendly work environment, and we treat people really nice here. And I know the HR person was sitting there saying, tell them, Summervill, And I said, and that is the minimum viable product for an employee relationship. Of course you treat people well. You don't get to pay under market because you treat people well. That's expected. But, that is the minimum expectation for an employee-employer relationship. Some of the biggest factors are why do they even start looking around? And that's something I hope you spend some time on. Because in the exit interview, you're not going to get this information. And only someone that's not very intelligent is going to say, I didn't like my management. They micromanaged. I'm not, I don't see, they're probably not going to tell you that. They're going to say, what are they going to say? They're going to say, I was recruited, or I just saw this great opportunity or something. But what really got them looking? Stress about the economy, burnout in a role, concerns about positions elimination. By the way, we have a fabulous report called the headcount report. And this data you can't find anywhere in the nation. And it's where we looked at all of our clients because all the data is in our web-based tool. And we were able to cut it up by asset size. And we were able to look at what the average headcount for some of the major departments that we chose. And guys, we are seeing training go down. And I'm like, gosh, does that repeat itself all the time? Like it's always been that. When the economy gets tough, who do we hit first? Training. It's like all the high-performing companies have proved that that is a mistake, that has never panned out. No high-performing company has ever said, let's eliminate training because things are tough. But we're actually seeing that slightly move down in the numbers. And I'm like, my gosh, I've been at this long enough to see that it's happening again. Concern about the employer's financial future. I think that many of you have gotten, that your organizations have made a commitment to be a little bit more transparent with employees about the financial success of the organization. Yeah? In your corporate scorecards, hopefully you're having those meetings more than once a year where, they figure out what kind of a bonus they're going to get. But well, guess what conversations you have to have this year? Most of you are really struggling with your numbers this year. Many of you are. I talked to a bank the other day about mortgage lending, and they totally eliminated the entire department and went to Rocket Mortgage. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying that's what they did, and I've never heard of such a thing in my entire life. But, they're looking at expenses and saying, we'll start again when the market opens up. Difficult conversations to have with employees, especially when you know that, they might decide to go apply for a job in San Jose and work remotely. And San Jose has 130% geographical wage differential, and you're closer to 94. So what do you do about that? Sometimes it's just fun to imagine life in a different job, and then I didn't expect to see bored looking for something to do. Hopefully they're not doing all this looking on your clock while they're logged in, looking around while they're on the clock. But employees are still, and it is kind of the American way, isn't it, to look to better your situation, look to see what's out there in the market. And do you know what the biggest compensation mistake that banks and credit unions all around the nation have made? And they make it every year, and I keep telling them, and they keep making it. It's this. What's your average labor budget going to be? Raise your hand if you think you're going to have a 4% labor budget this next year. 4. Everybody high. 4. 4. Okay, what about 3? Anyone going to make a 3? How about 5? Anyone? Feel like an auctioneer. 5. Can I get 5? Can I get 5? How about, can I just stop at 4.5? Anybody at 4.5? So interestingly, we'll go with 4. So here's the biggest mistake that they make. So if the average midpoint movement is 3%, and that, my friends, I'm about to prove to you, is conservative. So these new people start Everyone knows who's worked with BalancedComp. What's the comp ratio you should start someone with no experience? Let me hear it. There you go. I'm in the right crowd. That's right. 85%. And they started new, and you started them at 85% of the midpoint. I know your selection process is thorough, and you got a good employee who's going to give you the best that they have with the training that you provide, and they merit the 4% increase. But their midpoint moved 3%. And what is their comp ratio their second year? Let me hear it. 86. Now don't worry, 14 more years they will get to their midpoint. Unless you're hiring really unmotivated people. After you've trained them for 3 years and they're non-exempt, the market will be happy to pay them 100%. And they're sitting there at 88% of midpoint. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? I mean, if we were saving babies in the Sudan, maybe that wouldn't be a big deal. But even the nonprofits here, you know, it's a job. They're not saving the world. There's no reason for them to work under market. So in 3 years, the market's happy to pay them the midpoint if they're non-exempt, and in 5 years if they're exempt. This is the simplest mistake made over and over again. Now, once in a while, you have those managers that really go to bat for people, right? And they come into your office. Yeah, you know who they are. You can count them on one hand. So if you happen to work for one of those managers, then, you know, maybe you'll get a little love. But if you have a manager that doesn't want to, just doesn't want the pressure, it's easier to not deal with the conflict, doesn't want the scrutiny themselves, and they'll throw you under the bus. I'd like to do more for you, but HR, this is what they said we could do, right? They throw team one under the bus in that. So you've got, so there's that. I am finding and reading that one of the trends to combat the recruiting issue is to really reconsider non-traditional candidates. So maybe not looking as much to their educational backgrounds as if they have the skills and prior, you know, transferable skills. I think we're going to see more and more of that. I'm hearing more and more of that where education is not as much of a requirement. Now, for those of you that use compensable factors in your job, that doesn't mean you want to put that to a 2, because if the market would normally look for a college degree, you'll end up undergrading the job, and that's the opposite of what you're trying to do. But this is something that I think is definitely going on. What is our crystal ball prediction? Probably for the first time in my career, it is with great reluctance and hesitancy that I will reluctantly agree to 4.5. And I will tell you why here shortly. But usually it's like, this is it. Last year, the average labor budget was 5%. If you did less than 5, you'll have more makeup that you're going to need to do. And here's another one of my favorites. When we update the salary ranges, I respect the board of directors. But whether they approve the market's moving even if your board doesn't approve it, okay? It's the market, right? So this year we're seeing an average midpoint movement. I'm saying around 3%, but again, with such hesitancy, maybe executives 3.5. I don't think we've completely settled on it yet. I'll leave that to our compensation manager, Christie Summervill, and I will be looking at that. According to the new ADP report that came right off of payrolls, you know, the workers that changed jobs last year got a median increase of 16.1%. That just, with having a 40% spread, a 50% for executives, if we could proactively, and I know you would. Why do people get involved in HR? It's to make a difference. They want to do what's right. You're some of the most socially justice-minded people that I've ever met. I know, but I'm also not naive enough to think, well, it's just money, just spend it. I understand that you have budgets, but if they're leaving you for 16%, and you had a 40% spread, if you could have proactively increased them to where they are, you would have, maybe lost a few less people. And one of the things you want to watch out for are the good deal. The good deal is not the good deal anymore. Those are the people that are willing to come in for less until they get their foot in the door. And we used to praise managers for finding, not we, companies used to praise managers for finding those good deals, right? I'm just coming back from maternity leave. I took a few days, I took a few years off to raise my children. Now I just want to get back in. And they're willing to take the good deal. And they will return that loyalty to you as soon as they have enough experience under their belt and can go to work for the midpoint. We're just talking about the 50th percentile. No one is suggesting you have to pay over market, right? So the good deal is the biggest kiss of death. I would have almost a no-fly zone. You know where the midpoint is. You know where a new person would start. You know where someone with 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years experience should be. And if you stick to that, you don't have allegations of wrongful pay practices or people who leave you for, $1 an hour more. That's $2,080 before taxes, and they leave you for it, right? So there's something. 4.5, I'd rather see you at 5, not for your sake. I think unnecessary turnover is the worst money you ever saved if it's just a few dollars this side or that. Here's another important piece of data. Wages in the United States, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, increased from 5.97% in June, from year over year, from June of 2023 to June of 2022 to June of 2023. So you tell me where everyone's coming up with 4% as the average labor budget. I know they've increased a little head count, not much. They've had a lot of attrition as well. So that's a fact from payrolls, right? Yeah. Why, I know Willis Towers is projecting 4. I know it's others that are projecting 4. Here's a clue, something you wouldn't know. When people are saying 4%, what they're not talking about is what the average promotional budget, which is separate, should be. They're just, and we take that as all in one, because for many of us, it is all in one. But you have to consider, if you're going to go conservative, you're going to need an average promotional budget. The average promotional increase is about 7% for non-exempt and 10% for exempt, okay? And I'm always saying start them at 85%. There is a place to start people between 80 and 85% of the midpoint. If you can give someone the average promotional increase and they're at 82, that's fine. You can just manage the rest next year. So, there is a reason for that, a place for that. It's just more of an outlier reason, if you ask me. All right, any questions about what I've shared so far?
One of the things you said, Christie, was folks were leaving for 16%, and just give them the 16% and just to keep them. But how do you do that and maintain equity within the rest of your organization?
What I really meant to say, thank you, that's excellent. That's a great question. What I really meant to imply is that if we could proactively get them to where they should have been, where they should have been in the first place, there wouldn't be as much of a need to look around. If it's a hot job and they have 5 years experience, they probably should have been at 110% of the midpoint. But we think the good deal is just to let them, unless the squeaky wheel gets the oil, let them stay at 98%, okay? So I'm not saying just give everybody. What I'm talking about is actually a sustainable practice of moving people to where they should be. I'm not saying people can't still go to Google or go to larger companies or find themselves a better opportunity, but that should be more the outlier as opposed to they went to the same job at a company not much bigger than yours and got a 16% increase. If we can take care of the stuff that we have control over, I think that's a really good start, right? Good, I thank you so much for asking that. But let's talk about wage equity. Let's talk about internal equity. What I'm talking about is sustainable. I would move everybody to where they should be. I think it's the worst money ever saved not to, based on the amount of experience. It's in the best interest of the company, right? It's in the best interest of the company. And so using those scenarios to create that and put that information in front of those executives is a great way to stand back and have that conversation. What do we want to do about this? What do you think we should do to impact this? Like Alex said, you know. Any other questions at this point? Okay, all right, yeah. The average promotional budget, I've always heard it to be 1% of your labor budget in addition to that. But this year, I just have to admit that World at Work is saying it's 3%, which is shocking to me. If you said, in fact, I would use that little piece of information, like, you know, I'm telling you, you should have a 5% labor budget is preferable. And if they say 4%, then you need to ask for another 3 for promotional increases and then whittle that down to somewhere between 1, 1.5, and I think you might be where you need to be. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of the BalancedComp survey findings. This is a survey that just closed, like last week, right? For those of you that pre-ordered it, I think you just got it, right? And for those of you that are here, we've drawn a random winner of the salary survey that we'll announce at lunchtime. So that'll be fun, right? So 75% of the participants, which were about 480 participants, gave 2 out-of-cycle raises in 2022, and 53% planned it in 2023, all right? I don't know, we didn't ask what they plan on doing in 2024, but that really moved those dials on what those salaries are. The average midpoint movement, we benchmarked 410 respondents, not 480. I was being prophetic there. Next year it'll be 480. So 135, out of 135 positions, just year over year, raw data, the average movement was 5.85%. So how do we get to a 4% labor budget when I'm telling you the midpoints moved that fast? I've looked at the data. I would say that some of those, I just don't understand how they're coming up with a 4% labor budget. The unfortunate thing is that your board of directors and your executives, they're out there Googling what's the average labor budget increase, and they're seeing 4%. And then they come to you and say, what do you think we should do? So when you say 5, they think that's outrageous. When both the Bureau of Labor Statistics and what I'm telling you, we just saw in the most recent data, and that's only one survey, but there's a very good survey sampling, and it happened to tie in perfectly with the BLS data as well. Shows about 5.85% movement, right? So that 3% midpoint movement might reflect the projected budget season, but it probably doesn't encompass any out-of-cycle raises, any, really a full picture of the impact of those raises. Is anyone surprised by this data? No one is surprised by this data. Then I would expect you're going to be dialoguing for a higher labor budget than the 4% that your hands indicated. Because I don't know how you're going to, unless you really, really love recruiting. So let's take a look at the 20. We've got 20. Now, in that salary survey, we've listed 100. Isn't that right, Jordan? 100? Yeah, okay, good. 20 of the fastest moving salaries in the most recent BalancedComp survey. And there were 102 out of 130 jobs. This is why I'm so uncomfortable. Honestly, I have to just tell you, out of 130 jobs we benchmarked, 102 of them move faster than what we say the projected average midpoint movement is. Are you hearing that? That's 102 out of 130. That just can't be coincidental. And I know that this is very, very small, but you can have the slide. But in the first column over to the right, we have year-over-year movement. And then this year, we started adding the 2-year, year-over-year movement so we can start to get some kind of projection. Those IT business analyst jobs or business analyst jobs, the data on that has really moved up. I see that this is no surprise to all of you. I see your heads nodding on that. You will see on here a list of jobs that only require high school degrees as well as senior leadership, right? You do not see this list as only IT. And I just want us to stop and let's put our hands together for both the head of HR and the HR director. If there was any, well-deserved, well-deserved. So if this is true, and I assure you this is true, how can I tell you to move your midpoints by 3%? How can I tell you? So here's some of the impact for you guys. So yeah, we're going to trend it. We're going to move your salary ranges. But jobs that were a grade 13 might be a very high 13. And if you know the 2-year, year-over-year movement is this high, go with the 14. Or you know that you can override that by 5, 10, 15%, whatever you want now over on the job. So you may need to add, let me say that differently. You may need to add a premium, not for the whole job classification, but for the job. If you know that the salaries are moving that fast for these particular jobs, you will want to add a premium to the midpoint. I know that might seem to fly in the face of the fair culture, like we're so fair to employees, but fair is no longer defined as what's good for one is good for the other. How about what's equitable to the market, equitable for the company? And as the Chief of Workplace Excellence, which is my preferred title for all of you, it's your job to put the company in a good position, right? So looking at these jobs, you may very well, if the 2-year, year-over-year head of marketing, head of retail banking, the digital marketing social media specialist, the virtual tellers, Teller 1 was also up there as well. Look at that movement. I pray that none of you are using the grade 4 teller. With this kind of year-over-year movement, it won't fly. It really won't fly. And you won't be able to compete with retail for your frontline ambassadors to your organization. So cash treasury management specialist, call center reps, your internal auditor 1, your mortgage operations manager. By the way, that job is someone that is managing underwriting, servicing, and processing. I see that title used a lot of different ways. It's not just one of those functions. It'd be closers, servicers, processors, underwriters, anything but the sales piece of it, okay? The head of IT, no matter what you call it. If you call it an SVP of IT, that's your job right there, okay? Director of HR, mortgage closers, head of mortgage sales, and head of risk, market presidents, and there are 80 more jobs that move faster than the average midpoint movement that you need to be well aware of so that when your salary ranges are updated, that you know you have a real perspective, okay? Questions? Any questions about the data that's being shown here? Any surprises? Yes, ma'am.
How does asset size play into these?
Yeah, this data, I'm glad that you said that, asked that. This data is blending all the asset sizes together. So it could vary slightly, but for many of these jobs, when you compete for a business analyst, you're competing with all asset sizes. Let's look at that. When you're competing for HR, when you're competing for project managers, when you're competing for benefit, which ones of these would asset size, maybe the head of retail, that might be impacted by asset size, but virtual marketing, tellers, a lot of these would not be impacted much by asset size, would they? Yeah. That's good. Yeah, good question. Anybody? So if you look at the survey, or if you ask Jordan as your favorite consultant how that applies to your particular asset size, we're happy to help you with that. Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions? Surprises? What are some of the hot jobs that you struggle to hire? What are your hottest jobs, hardest jobs to keep or retain? Call center, okay. I want to say treasury is a difficult one. That's a very specific skill set, isn't it? Yeah. Did I hear IT? I heard IT, but could you be more specific? Like which kinds of jobs in IT? Security?
Yeah, security.
Yeah, for us is cybersecurity, but then for us is compliance, audit, BSA is what we're my biggest.
Okay. Well, there were 80 other jobs that I couldn't fit on this screen. Although we tried, Lord knows. You can tell. Yeah. Senior credit analysts, very hard to find those jobs. And people don't seem to be home growing. I mean, it takes you 5 years to home grow one, so there's that. All right, very good. Now, so that's the hard reality, is that the onus will be on you to educate and guide your executives to making a good decision for the organization. And your amount of recruiting is going to be directly related to how successful you are in letting them be aware that the 4% that you see is so far from the whole story. I've never seen it this off. I'm afraid, and for BalancedComp, we want all of you guys to be the most successful. So we've gotten very opinionated when we see you're headed over a cliff and there's some things you need to know before you make your decision. So engaging with them early in the process. The last thing we really recommend or would want to see is for the CFO to come to you and say, well, we've got a 4% labor budget this year. What are we going to do with it? I strongly encourage you to come up with your own conclusions. For those of you that have a budget builder tool, you should use that. Know that we are here we've got budget builder sessions on your dashboard that you should all be signed up for. And I'm just going to say, I don't want to, again, sound too shouldy, but the first two sessions had 2 people each in it. I'm like, they have so much on their plate. They need to deal with this. We want to see you in those budget builder sessions so that we can help guide you to making your own budget and knowing what's going to be right for your organization. But engaging early, sharing those statistics from the Bureau of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics is going to be very important, aligning with them. The question isn't how much is the average labor budget in the market. The question is, how much do you need? You might already have people paid well over the midpoint for the most part. Maybe you only need 3.8, who knows? That would be great. But how much do you need? And you will only know that if you consider their current comp ratio and their performance level. There's that, right? Because if you're circling 1 through 5 on friendly and job knowledge and teamwork, that's not going to be taken very serious when you look at your labor budget. So hopefully you have a good, solid, objective performance management system. Understanding your management's top priorities and really what they are dealing with in terms of how crunched their numbers are. And for those of you that CECL is impacting the rates that you can loan at, they're impacted even more. So if you've done, taken higher risk mortgage loans, that's going to definitely impact their margin as well. So making sure that you're well aware of, like, do you know your capital ratio? Do you know your ROA? Do you know what the margin is on a commercial loan? I'm telling you, as HR professionals, they need business partners who understand the business of what they're doing. Those are just 3 simple ones that I hope that you'll make sure that you commit to learning, so that you can be the partner that helps them move the dial on compensation. Also in IT, the skill sets that are necessary in IT are so much different than what they were. You have a lot of core processors that are in the clouds. You're needing what used to be called a core processing specialist, may be called a systems engineer, and in addition to title hyperinflation, because they're not writing gameware software, they're not full-in developers, but they're throwing titles around like that. So you want to make sure you don't go on the other side and, they throw the word JavaScript at you and you're like, grade 16, okay. You want to make sure that you're not going overboard with it either, but that you really understand how the profiles and what they need, what it really should be called. You don't want to tell them their titles are wrong necessarily, but you want to make sure you grade it right, even if they use a hyperinflated job title, right? So, investing time in training your managers I am not a big proponent of pay transparency. I am a big proponent on methodology transparency. And there is a difference. And I want to encourage you all strongly to deliver maybe even annual training to managers on methodology transparency. These millennials, as we were talking about, they're not just taking HR's word that they have the right salary range. They've all been out to www.IAin'tPaidEnough.com, and by God, that number is always higher than what they're paid, right? So they're out there, they're researching, they're looking at these systems where people self-report their salaries. I think they must all be from San Jose or something, because the numbers are always so high, always so high. But training managers regularly, if you did this, you would do a number of things. You would lower the propensity of being accused of wrongful pay practices, because they're like, oh, wow, they've got a methodology. Or, oh, they're using an expert. Oh, they've got 20 sources plus of data. And so the fear goes down, which means we eliminate some of those reasons for why they are looking around by giving them the information ahead of time, right? So doing that on a regular basis, I think, is very important to mitigating, calming employees and helping them feel like there's no reason to look around. We've got this. We've made it a core competency of this department to know where the market is and to ensure that we're paying people competitive to the market, right? Many misinformed still believe that it's the employer's responsibility to make up inflation. Maybe even some people here think it's the employer's responsibility to make up for inflation. Well, let me tell you the good news. The good news is when inflation does go down to 2.5, if we ever get it back there, 2% if we ever get it back there, we're not going to take any money away from them, right? So that's the good news. But their personal choice of where they live and the fact that we're all going through inflationary times is not the employer's responsibility to make that up. Now, that said, many small to medium-sized organizations have used their internal values to make decisions on compensation. You may have heard boards say, anyone just do a flat bonus to everyone? Like, we're going to give everyone 15. I'd really be curious to see. What do we got? Yeah, what were the amounts that you gave them? Yeah, anyone, just shout it out. How much did you give them?
I gave them 1,000, and it was for those under a certain amount.
Okay, very good. Anyone else?
We gave 1,500 across the board.
1,500 across the board. 1,500 across the board. Anyone else?
I want to qualify that by saying we did that twice.
Okay, you gave them $1,000 2 times in the same year. Okay, but it was just a bonus. Anyone else? Okay. Did it, after they cashed those checks, did they go back to talking to recruiters? That's kind of my problem with those bonuses, is it shows some love, but, you know, and I admit, the week that they had that extra money, they loved you a little bit more. But when they can leave for a 16% average salary increase, that just goes right out the window. My issue with bonuses like that is that those people that are at 115% of their midpoint, their base pay, they got it. And those people that are at 83% of their midpoint, they got it. And after those checks, you were still in the same situation. I would probably prefer to see that money used to market correct, to get people that are low in their range for the amount of experience that they have to be paid a little bit higher in their range. Because I'm a business person, and I want to see a return on every dollar that I spend. It's got to improve something. It's got to do something. It's not just about the love. So there's that. Yeah, educating on compensating at remote levels. So, you know, making sure everyone knows what you're doing on that. And then also, what are you doing on that? Are you paying? Oh, this is a great question. When you allow remote working, how many of you pay at the current level that you, your corporate level, like whatever it is at the corporate level, that's what we pay. I need it high so I can see. This is very interesting. Good. And how many of you pay at the level, the geographical level of where they are? Up high so I can see. Okay. Yeah. I think the market is still auto-correcting on that. The market is trying to figure out what they want to do about remote work and about paying at those levels. I think a lot of it depends on where you have to recruit from. Those that need a broader recruiting strategy learn that if you're going to recruit in San Jose, you better pay in San Jose levels or you're not going to get anyone. So therefore, they wouldn't want a different philosophy for their internal employees and where they're going to work. But I think that it's still about 50-50, and it'll depend on your recruiting strategy and where you need to go. So grounding your decisions in market data, understanding the organization's unique needs is going to make you more informed and more impactful choices. That's so important as you look at internal equity and as you decide, if you did decide what Marie was suggesting, if you do hire some, raise someone's salary to 100 or 16% above where they were, what do you do with the other people? And engaging with your finance team and aligning with your strategic initiatives is going to be very important. Don't wait, be proactive about it. Even if you give them a budget and they shoot it down and go back to the drawing board, work on it. Because there's only one person in that one department in that company that is married to and has an understanding of the total reward proposition to employees. And that is human resources, right? If you back away from that challenge, it will just not be done. And the company will suffer for it. Even though I know you may take some personal challenges, some personal hits when you have to have hard, critical conversations. I know that that's very difficult, and you understand the pressure that CEOs and management are under in this interest rate margin. But together, looking at that, setting up those constraints, how would we set those constraints up? Do you remember the in-the-box thinking? Over at the top, it would be what? Retain employees? Is that fair? I'm just thinking through this on the fly. I just saw the presentation like you did, but I liked it. And then over to the right would be, what would be over to the right or left? What are the, pardon? Margins. Like how much money can they afford to spend? Is that what you mean? Okay, I didn't know who that is. I'm staring blankly into the lights, okay? And then over here, what do we have over to the right or to the other side? What, oh, okay, what the market is paying, right? Is that, or what the market data is. And then as we look at that, what are we going to do? How would you like to impact that? How would you like to impact that? Because every single one of you are going to be dealing with this. So let's do it as a group.
Well, it's so costly to lose people.
Yes.
And that has a direct impact on margins.
Yes.
So telling that story is, one approach.
And I agree. I just think you've been telling that story. Like, what does it cost to lose someone? 1.5 times their salary. Like, I wish the CFOs had to create a report that would actually show what the actual cost of turnover was, just using the facts that you have, 1.5. So that would be definitely very helpful. My concern for you on the front level staff is, I know that you do a lot of recruiting from your front level staff after year one for deposit ops, for commercial loan processors, for those call center. There's people now who know your systems, they know your culture. And if we lose them, what do we do? What are you going to face on the next year? You're going to have serious consequences to that. So I think telling that story is very important, and getting buy-in on that. Unfortunately, sometimes I see organizations that have to lose really important talent before they're like, oh, maybe we're not paying the commercial lenders enough. I guess we should look at that, or whatever the position is. And I just hate to see that have to be what really drives that change. But it's an important Rosemary, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, to get them to see the whole picture, I think go back in history, if we have the data analytics, and I know some people in small organizations are challenged with that, but if we could prove what our turnover rate looked like, the dollars that it costs, and use the data that you supply today, the data that you've always supplied, I think we could tell a better story. And I think that's what it's going to take, and sometimes it's how we do it, and we may not be able to do a data dump all at once, but I think it's little by little we can make a difference and drive that a little bit better.
That's good. That's really good. We are working on reports. Jacqueline, you want to share that?
Yeah, I'm super jazzed for this conversation because we already have all of your data for your retention, for your turnover. We just haven't been able to construct the report. It's pretty high in our backlog, and I'll be really excited to go ahead and add in the dollar value of the cost of that. And it should give you your historical data as well. So I'm hoping that in the next few quarters we'll be able to arm you with that story.
Yeah, want to put it on your dashboard and make it super obvious for you. Yeah. What was your turnover last year? Just throw out some numbers. 25, I hear 19. What did you say? 13. Where are you from? Who said 13? Virginia, 13% in Virginia. Anyone else? 9, where are you from? Billings, Montana, okay, all right. 22%, 14%. What we're seeing is, what was very interesting is if you had just asked me any year, just off the cuff, the answer is almost always 20%, 18 to 20%. And last year it was also 18 to 20% as a median, which is the 50th percentile. But the mode, the one that, and I've never seen such a difference, was 25% was the number that came up the most often. Rosemary, did you want to say
I was
something?
going to say, what was the average turnover during COVID? And I think we were like at 26% during COVID piece.
Yeah.
We were way low.
Very low.
Yeah, they're probably hanging on to their jobs just to frighten. You're this year's, and do you know why, Lori?
We have merged core values.
Tell me about that. I want to hear.
So yeah, that was a big
You really think that moved the dial?
I really actually do. The CEO change, our former CEO retired. So we had a new CEO come in, and we tried to use that as a kind of a launching ground, for giving people something to sort of, rally around, that's more than just come to work and take 5 each day. I checked a little bit ago, and people are constantly submitting. There wasn't an easy acronym for the 8 values that we went with, and they were constantly working on that. So they created like a crossword puzzle. I don't know. We just see a lot of it.
That's really cool.
We also, and I didn't mention it earlier, but we also launched a reward recognition platform, which was just a lot, just being nice to each other.
Was that where they can recognize somebody and shoot like some social media message inside the company about?
And the whole reason.
What's that system called?
The one that we use, and I did not go with the Cadillac version, is called FinComp.
Bond. Okay. All right. I'm really excited for that.
I did it to make my life easier on service recognition, gifting, because it's a gifting component to it. But I really think where we've gotten the bang for our buck is just the shout outs. We're pretty spread out as an organization. And, people are putting on people they've never met before face to face. And so, yeah.
Do they get points for this, and then those points translate to?
You get points, yeah. Each quarter, they have points that they can give and can receive. And then there's some special opportunities as well. So, yeah.
That's really great. Lori, okay, pop quiz here. Lori, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are your 8 core values?
So our 8 core values are, because now you got me on the spot.
I know.
We have collaboration. Well, I'm trying to remember the.
I really did put it.
Well, I'm gonna have these because I do know them. Okay, they are at. I should. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna look it up, but I'm gonna write them down. So,
Okay.
The reason I asked you that is because in 2000, when I started, 1999, 2000 is when I started, there was this big push towards core values. And soon, it was just surprised to me how few people knew what they were. So I was just like, I hope that so I saw this really kind of fade, and maybe it's making a big comeback, and I love that story. I'm so excited. I hope you'll stay in touch with that. Yes, ma'am.
I have mentioned core values story. I was trying to think of a way this year to get our employees more engaged with the core values instead of just us being on the screen.
Yeah.
Or staff meeting. So we separated our team, we're around 100 employees, into different departments, different teams. And then every month, each team has to do something over their core values. We didn't give them like specific instructions, but they come up with different videos, skits, just all kinds of things that they do in front of the staff meeting that they blow me away. Things that I'm like, I never grew up with. I don't know, just to watch their kids become alive and learn about their core values is really neat. So, just not it.
That's really great. That's really great. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have? Yes, ma'am.
So we have 4 core values.
So we put our core values under the competencies and balanced results. That's where we have them. We always open meetings with them, reviewing the core values, and we do a value story. We have a value story email. Most of our workforce people know, so people can send in value stories about other people, and it's very, positive and focusing on what's going right. You have a meeting saying, does anyone have value stories? So it's just that reinforcement.
I love that, and honestly, I like that much better than like a 360-degree feedback. I know they have different purposes, but because it's so spontaneous, it would be different every year because you do it right when something happens and recognize that, and I think that makes it more meaningful to the employees because employees want to be compensated equitable to the market, no doubt about that. And the more methodology you use, the better off you are with all the EEOC categories because you have a structure and you have methodology. But they don't just want that because they can replace what you're paying them very easily in this market. So the glue that keeps them is definitely culture. And culture is led by managers who weren't just picked because they were good doers and stayed there 10 years and it's their turn, we ought to give them a shot. And, you know, culture is led by managers who are effective and have the skills needed and training needed to develop engaged relationships with employees. They got to have a big cup of give a damn. They got to drink it every day, right? It's got to be that's who they are. You can't make a good manager if they don't have that inside of them. So I love hearing what you're saying about culture. So, Lori, I want to come back to you before we move on. Okay, you're okay. I'm so sorry. Well, actually, this is good. This is really positive because 8 is a lot of core values, and you're just going to want to make sure that it doesn't die down. That it's not just. Remember the book Fish? Fish was great, wasn't it? I could take that. Fish is wonderful, and for a while people were doing fun things, and it was the best. And then it just kind of died down. So it's going to need new energy. I loved what you said about how you bring it up in staff meetings, that you put it under core competencies, under their performance management system. Great documentation would be how many points they earned in the FON system. So things that really, really are meaningful, right? So transparent communications with employees throughout the compensation planning cycle is essential. They want to know, how is my raise determined, and what would I have to do to get a better raise, right? Who doesn't want to know that? If you're hiring motivated employees, if you're hiring high accountability people, they definitely want to know what that is. They want to know how you determined that raise and what determined that they got a 4% or 4.5. And they do tend to find out that almost everybody else got the same raise as them. And what is the message that comes across with that? Knock yourself out, sweetheart. We're all getting the same thing here, right? That's exactly right. So addressing methodology, transparency, developing management training, because they will go, I know you think everyone runs to your door, but they probably run to the manager's door first, and the supervisor's door used to be their BFF until they got the raise. So they're going to go, right? So they're going to complain to them first. So make sure that they at least can say, well, we have an outside expert. I've looked at lots of data. It's tailored to our market. It's tailored to our asset size. So at least that, what you don't want, what you cannot allow. You cannot allow for someone to say, well, HR determined that. It's just what management gave us. So I would have liked to have done more, man. I'm sorry you're at the max. You're redlined. And, you know, you want to be able to have a reasonable response for people. And if you have the methodology, you have a reasonable explanation. There's no reason you wouldn't educate them on that, right? So also training equips managers to handle those difficult conversations, right? They got into management because they like people, which is the very reason that it makes it difficult for them to say you're at the maximum, or you only got a 3% raise, or holding them accountable for their on the essential functions of their job. So these people need that from you. So guide them towards improvement and growth opportunities for the following year on that. So we've talked a little bit about the single geo on remote work, and that's become very popular. Ask yourself on the remote work, is the remote work impacting how you compete for talent? If it is, then you may want to pay at that location. That also means paying down. If they go to work in Dothan, Alabama, it might mean not paying Boston wages, okay? Have you experienced resistance or unwillingness from employees to come back into the office, especially your IT team? Have you had, I didn't have to add that last one in there, but have you had an unwillingness? Have they gotten past it once they knew that the line was really drawn in the sand and that's really what it is? Have you lost people? Raise your hand if you don't mind if you feel like you've lost people because of remote work. Okay. You see how serious this is? This is,
We're getting some really excellent talent because we're hiring.
oh, tell us, Patty.
Well, just a lot of people who were forced to come back to the office are looking because they want to stay remote. So we opened up hiring remote from in-state, out-of-state, and we've got some amazing talent from other credit unions because they work remote for us.
What kind of systems have you put in place to ensure productivity? I think the major fear, if people were just honest, is, it's like Elon Musk. You can pretend to work somewhere else, right? So how do you ensure you're getting?
Trust our employees is our number one thing. If we can't trust them, we have to bring back, that was our number one. We do have departments that have productivity tools, like the call center has how many calls you're on, how active you are. The underwriters, the processors, you can see how many they're processing. So there are definitely departments that have systems in place. Originally, when we first went into the pandemic, we had the PC monitoring. We thought, oh, we're going to monitor this. It felt so icky that we were almost like, nobody's going to be that police. Nobody wanted to be that police. Nobody wanted to bring it up. So that's when we're like, if we can't trust them, then we bring all that in. Trust them.
This didn't come natural to me. I'm Generation X, as you can tell, and it didn't come natural to me. I remember right before COVID, I thought I was being so progressive. I was going to let them work remote one day a month. And for that reason, we put, made sure everyone had their apps on their phone, and we took care of all the infrastructures. And they are so, I have really changed. And frankly, to be fair, I'd been on airplanes with these little snots sitting next to me that were bragging about how they would say, they were in IT, and they were bragging about how they would say the project took 5 days, and if they got done in 3.5, then they took the day and a half off. And my heart as an entrepreneur just froze. How could you? How could you? So, but if you have the environment where they can be, and you can put things in place to make sure, I can tell you, I have completely done an about face and did not expect to. So I know we have about almost 4 minutes, so I'm going to have to run through this, but I love the conversation. This has been super. Variable pay is another thing that you want to look at. Examine your corporate bonus. Who is eligible? What is the targeted payout? Biggest mistake I see a lot make is they don't tie it to, they're like, oh, we have a corporate bonus structure, and then all the execs get 10% of base pay. And it's like, that's not competitive to the market. At market performance, at peer performance should equate to the average variable pay for the job classification, right? And then adding in, we've kind of taken a big swing between, used to be everyone, to be fair to everyone, you had to have everyone involved. Then when the economy went bad, they're like, well, those tellers can't impact capital ratio and ROA. What are we doing that for? So they cut them all out. Now there's a swing back to, is there a way where we can tie in like the performance score and weight it maybe 50% so that you're not giving everyone the same raise just because they managed to stay hired, right? Work-life family balance. One of the most important things I'm going to tell you today is that if you see employees who are not taking PTO, I guarantee you that their extra productivity is not worth the cost of burnout. You will lose them. Then these are sometimes your highest performers who just work until they can't take it anymore, and then they work themselves into a corner where they have to go somewhere else because that's just unsustainable. So I encourage you to proactively identify, and remote work is one of the biggest culprits because it is really true that they will work themselves, they'll work themselves so much that, afterwards, and you see that mental health issues are coming up with people that are remote. They don't have that engagement. They don't have those relationships. They're not getting those intrinsic needs met from a social perspective. So you've got to really keep your eye. I'm all about remote work, but you've got to really keep your eye on that, right? So, yeah. So, after dealing with COVID, and I don't want to just pass by that like that was nothing, right? After having to deal with remote work, and you've got management over here, and you've got employees over here, and you're trying to be a good business partner with that. After the Great Resignation, after the high inflation and the insane salary movement that I've never seen in my life, and you've got to still deal with that. It's your job, your sacred honor as the Chief of Workplace Excellence to educate management on what they're going to need to accept. The things I'm presenting are facts. They're not hyperbole. You've got to educate them and equip them to enter into the ring with you and look at that in-the-box scenario and make the right decision about salary increases. And this year, unlike probably any other year, it's not I guess that's what concerns me. 4% might be just perfect for some people. But there are some, like that business analyst with a 2-year 40% movement in salary, that you are assuredly going to lose if you take the same paintbrush, paint the whole matrix, apply that to everyone, and call it good. You will assuredly lose people, and I just don't want to see that for you. So you've got a big task, but it's no accident that you're here. It's no accident that you're in your role, and everything that you've dealt with up till now is equipping you for that next step this year. And I hope that we will be a part of, that's what our love is to empower, advocate, and equip HR professionals to be the voice, the business partner that your company needs at this time. So thank you very much. Were there any questions? Sorry. I came on down. Okay.
With the new overtime proposed rule of salaries less than 55,000, is that going to be something that you guys address with job titles and make recommendations, or?
So you're really talking about the proposal of raising the exempt pay level classification,
Yes.
the pay level to $55,000 in order to be exempt, right?
Correct. Yes, correct.
Yeah, I want you to know exactly who that hits. I want you all to know this. It is that grade 9 level, grade 8 level. Can we just say it together? Assistant branch managers are not exempt. So generally, unless your branch manager is outside sales 35 to 40% of their time, where this person is truly managing, and you really give them the kind of discretion in order to, they really have the kind of discretion to step outside of the very clearly set boundaries. I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to be an attorney. That job has never been one that I thought met the criteria. And now with this, you definitely, I just don't think it's going to fly, but see your favorite labor attorney. But all of those, it generally hits about your grade 8 and 9s, and we'll just see what they do with it. Yeah, for sure. How's everybody else going? You're just paying attention at this point, right? You're just on notice. We saw how they changed it at the last minute the last time, so we'll see what they do with it. You made it through it the last time when they raised it, so I'm sure you'll make it through this. You also know you'll have to look at the internal equity when you decide to move some people up. If that is better for you than calling them non-exempt. But really, when you're just all educated and smart, professional people, I know that in your heart of hearts, you kind of know where the black and white is, you know where the gray is, and that gray just became black and white. Yeah. Any other questions? Pardon? Oh, Lori? Oh, okay. We'll get to you, I promise.
I got the mic. Can you hear me? So I'm curious, can you expand on your comment that you're not a fan of pay transparency?
I didn't mean the law, actually. I got to be careful about saying things like that. Actually, I've never been a big fan of government telling businesses what to do, but in this particular case, I actually think that there's some real benefits to that. The ones that I think will be helped from it are women and minorities that have traditionally been held down. And so I think the pay transparency will probably be very helpful for that, but you'll have to see me on my pay transparency presentation that I'll be doing, I think, tomorrow. So I mean, I don't like publishing salary ranges for all to see and attack. Okay? I think it's a core competency within an organization, and you've gone through a lot for that expertise, and to think someone can just print that off and give that to every employee or give it to your competitors seems to me to be silly. And I've never seen it work. Like theoretically, doesn't that just sound beautiful? Let's just publish our pay ranges and it should all be fine. I have never seen it work where people were not, well, if your admin assistant's a 7, mine is sure an 8, you know? I've just never seen it work, even in HR. Even in HR. Meaning I've had HR people cry at their salary grade because and deeply wounded because it meant they weren't appreciated. It meant something to them. It's the internal voice of what they said that meant to them. And it's the opposite of everything they've worked their whole life to get to. So it hurts. So I'm not a big fan of posting salary ranges for all to see. I am a huge fan of explaining to employees and managers how we determine our salary ranges, the process and the methodology and the survey data that goes into it, why you can believe that this is tailored for your specific city and state and your asset size and the way that you use your job. Huge fan, but just not publishing all that. Does anyone here publish your ranges for all to see? Ooh, how does it work?
Because all of our salaries, our ranges, they are based on competencies. So employees know exactly what the competencies are that they have to achieve for that wage and whatever. And so when a position opens or anything like that, they say, here's the wage, here are your competencies, what do you think? I don't have any issues. My biggest issue is McDonald's pays, whether $19
First time I've ever heard that, but I am totally open. Anybody else? Oh, Maria, do you put all your salary ranges together? Why don't you just do all of them? Since it's such a lovely thing to do, why wouldn't you show? Why wouldn't you show?
Exactly what I got there. I think it helps. I think what happens is this is what I'm dealing with now. This is like, I need your help next year because everyone is now doing those ranges and saying, well,
Why am I not at the top?
or I'm going to be the next grade. The manager's saying, well, I think we've got the next grade. And you said to me, well, the greater is the salary. And every single time it's salary. So that's where it's causing some problems.
I see. Fair enough, fair enough. Anybody else want to share? I love it.
You're not saying not to give the employee their
No, I am not saying. I wouldn't say, I'm just saying I wouldn't say, here, company, from grade 1 to 24, here are all the ranges and the jobs that fall in it. It's like, do you want a mutiny? Knock yourself out. And, you know, you could be the best teller you ever met in your life. All the competencies, wow. And it is still a grade 5. And so that's, you know, so that is a concern. That is a concern. So anyway, anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, can we?
Yep, we can
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So what about total compensation reports? Does that help
or hurt or as far as employee retention?
This would be the group to ask. What about employee compensation reports? Helps. Does someone have a system that they use that pulls that together easily for you? I need to hear. What is it?
I use Excel.
UKG. Okay, so it's built into some of the systems. I'll let you all talk about that in your HR roundtables this afternoon. Yeah, that's good. The thing I want to say about total rewards, because I'm a big believer in them, is sometimes I've heard CEOs say, yeah, but we give them this much in their annual bonus. And my comment to that is, well, there's 95% of your other talent that is paid competitive to market and get that bonus. So wouldn't you need to be competitive on both for all positions? Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Christie. So one of the questions I would have and need assistance with is I feel that every year we reinvent every year. As we're going to move just from strategic planning instead of a year-to-year strategic plan, as an organization, we've moved to a 3 to 5 year strategic plan.
Talking about strategic planning. And so as we've moved from, next year, this is our strategic plan, really pushing and going, we're going to do 3 to 5 years. And again, we don't know what our crystal ball gets a little bit fuzzier, right, as we get further out. But as an organization, if we know what our strategic goals are, and growth, what I'd like to be able to do is to start having some real candid conversations about what does that mean for compensation. Because even though we don't know market, we do know minimum expectations. And so for me, I'd love to be able to find a tool or a way to say, okay, this is our strategic plan, what our growth projection is. If we know I'm going to have to grow membership by 6% or 8%, what does that translate in bodies realistically? And then what is that going to cost us?
Yeah.
And really start having conversations about, we're here right now. Where do we need to be in 3 to 5 years? But I feel like we keep coming back to this. What do we have today versus what do we need tomorrow?
Yeah.
And how do we start having that conversation?
I'm going to tell you a secret, Virginia. Jacqueline's in charge of all the software developers. She would be in charge of that feature. I just had to do that. Yeah. That's true. Right now, we don't give you a tool that will allow you to project out for 3 to 5 years. So I can understand that. That's a good point.
But I think that the system, don't get me wrong, I think the system does a good job. I think in the pay philosophy, I think is where you can start talking more about where do we want to be. Because I don't know about you guys, but if you talk about a midpoint average of 4% increase and the market shifted 6, you're already 2 points behind.
Right.
And we've already been behind for a really long time.
Right.
And I can tell you our salary budget this year was 10%. And we try to stick around 8%, and we're still trying to catch up.
Yes.
And so I think the tools that we have that you're giving us are good, but we just have to be able to actually use them.
Yeah.
And to use the budgeting tools because they're right there.
Yeah.
And then how can we connect that to that strategic plan? Because they're going to have to be together at some point.
I can see how important that is. And I can see if you're going to go over to the next asset size and how will that change your projections. And if you're already having a hard time getting caught up, it's going to feel like to executive management that you're never caught up, that you're always asking for more, but you kind of start it. I'm not saying anything about rally, but if you start it behind the wheel, then and you did the MVP of what's the least amount we could do, then you're always going to feel like you're trying to play catch up, and that's problematic. So yes, and taking that forward into the future would be even more helpful. I will say overall, I don't see a lot of movement in the average variable pay. That amount doesn't change a lot. So I've been paying attention to this for years. So the average variable pay for executives, for exempt and non-exempt, it seems like that That's kind of stayed pretty consistent. Just want everyone to know know what that is. And you know, if you want to know what what is the average variable pay for your position, just ask your favorite consultant or comp manager for that report. We'd be happy to give that to you. All right, this time for real. She's going to pull the hook, so thank you.